All right. So, good morning, everyone. So here was the question that I received. What did you do practically when you wrote an entire mezuzah only to realize there may be mistakes? And when I received this question, let me first share a little bit about what it brings up for me. It speaks to the high risk nature of practicing STaM. It could almost feel like a nail-biting experience sometimes, or like walking a tightrope, because there's little room for error. If we're writing a mezuzah, it's taking us 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or however much time it's taking you at this point in your craft. And we know that there's the halachos of Kesidron, and we know that there's the names of Hashem. And so if we make a mistake that gets undetected, then we in fact run the risk of losing a day's worth of work, hours worth of work, not to mention the materials that are involved. So this could create a kind of pressure, a kind of internal pressure inside, an experience of intensity that can make this work extremely burdensome and taxing. And so I think the real question is, how do we go about that? How can we be present with the high risk nature, let's just say, of our work, but at the same time not have it arrest us, not have it constrict us, and be able to show up in our work in a way that's still expansive and spacious and creative and aligned? And I think that's important for two reasons. First of all, it's important just because crafting STaM is a mitzvah, it's holy work, and the highest way of showing up for it is from a place of Ivdus Hashem B'Simcha, is from a place of spaciousness, is from a place of presence. Second, if we don't, we actually run the risk of driving ourselves away from the practice, because a lot of us are not up to handling high levels of stress, and we don't want that in our life. Third, the more stressed we are and the more under pressure we are, the harder it is for something really beautiful to come through us. I think when we look at the Oisius of Reb Ruvain, we see a certain grace, we see a certain elegance, and there's some kind of intuition that grace and elegance come through us when we're more relaxed, when we're more spacious, when we're more at ease. So, it's like reading handwriting, graphology, right? People can look at handwriting and see something about the person. So there's no question that our mood, our state of being is decisive in allowing something more beautiful to come through us or inhibiting that. So for these three reasons, both because it's a mitzvah and for the practical purpose of having this work be sustainable for us, as well as for facilitating the most beautiful work, we really want to look at how can we turn this around? How can we neutralize any from the burden of responsibility that we carry? And I would go even further. How could we even take that burden of responsibility? How could we take that, the high stakes nature of our work? I like to call it brain surgery, right? It's like when a surgeon is operating on a patient, it's high stakes. There's no wiggle room, or certainly not much, for any mistakes, for any mess ups. So how can we take that and even contextualize it, be magdir it, and create it in a way, create it in the way that we think of it, create it in the way that we relate to it, create it in such a way that actually facilitates our expansion. And this is an idea that we've talked about before. My relationship with something is always a function of the beliefs and ideas that I have about that thing, right? We're always in relationship with things through the prism of our minds, through the prism of our thoughts, through the prism of our beliefs, through the prism of our ideas, which, by the way, those always arise in language, in the thinking mind and in the spoken word. Our ideas and beliefs and views always arise in language. So our relationship with something is always a function of what we believe or ideas that we're attached to, and those are always made out of language, made out of oisius, made out of linguistic structures. So I'd like to share with you an incident that happened with me literally this week. And it really is a great story and a great example to build the idea that I want to share with you off of. Recently, I've been asked by two people to write for them tefillin on a cloth of shlil shchuta. Now, to obtain cloth of a shlil shchuta, for anyone watching this video after this conversation who doesn't understand what that is the unborn fetus of an animal that was shechted. So it is very unusual to get that because most of the animals that go for shechita are actually not pregnant. And so to get a shlil shchuta is rare. I know that in Canada also there are laws that make it illegal to do anything with the shlil of a shchuta. So it's not easy to obtain a shlil shchuta. The cloth for one pair of tefillin of shlil shchuta costs $1,000. The cloth alone costs $1,000. Now, I had written, I even have a picture of it. I had written Kaddish Li of the first parts of the Shalosh. And on the third line, after I had written the word Bavur Ze Asa Hashem Li, somehow I created a little smudge. I'll actually pull the picture up. Picture is 1,000 words, right? I'll show you guys. Here it is. No, Bavur Ze Asa Hashem Li, okay? Here it is. Let me just enlarge it here a bit. Okay. Okay. So you can see in the word Ba'avur, a little spreading, a little smudging. And I had already written Hashem's name, the last word on the line that you can see here in this picture. And I got anxious because I wasn't sure if it would be problematic for me to fix it by scraping. Just to take a closer look there. I was, hyper concerned, anxious. So I set it aside. And I began to write the other Kaddish because the person ordered 2 pairs of tefillin, and Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. After some time, maybe a couple of days passed, I looked at it again and I thought to myself, nah, this is fine. It has Tzuras Ha'os, the ayin is an ayin, the beis is a beis. And I really felt comfortable to just go ahead and fix it up and move along. Now, it stayed stuck in the back of my mind. Sometimes I feel like, Adam Korvitz Latzma, it would be a financial loss, a significant one, especially given the cloth that this is being written on, if it would be puzzle. So maybe I'm a little bit biased. So in the back of my mind, I thought to myself, I would love to just get this confirmed with the Rav. And that's why I actually had taken a picture of it before fixing it, a sharp, clear picture, so that I would be able to actually discuss it later on with the Rav and just get confirmation that it was fine to fix. This was a few weeks ago. Now, last week, I'm almost complete with these tefillin, writing these tefillin. So last week I took this picture and emailed it to a Rav. A day later, I got an email back from the Rav. The Rav says, Shaila chamura ma'oid, call me after Shabbos. Shaila chamura ma'oid, call me after Shabbos. I'm telling you, I was really devastated, because not only did I fix it already, I have since then completed the entire Shalrosh. I wrote the afterwards. The whole Shalrosh is complete. If this is somehow considered possible, not allowed to be fixed, this will be a loss for me of $500 just on the cloth, not to mention the work time. And the customer would be extremely disappointed because they're waiting eagerly for the tefillin, and this would be a setback on the calendar. So you can imagine, this was on Wednesday or Thursday. I was just really devastated. And I wrote back to the Rav. I'm like, what? I can't believe it. I thought it was an open shut case. I fixed it already. Whatever. I'll call you after Shabbos. So it turns out that this was Rav from Hirsch Vosner in Monsey. And I had occasion to go to Monsey this past Motzei Shabbos. So I called him before Shabbos and I said, listen, would it be okay if I come by your house on Motzei Shabbos and, show you some shilas, including that one? Yeah, okay, fine. If it's short, it's okay. So I brought with me that shilah and another few shilas. I brought with me the original parsha, which I had already fixed, so there was really couldn't tell anything, and my phone where I had this picture in it. I show him the picture. He's like, this is not what I saw. I'm like, what do you mean this is not what you saw? This is what I emailed you. He was like, no, this is fine. This is fine. You can fix this, no problem. So what happened? What happened was his gabbai printed out the picture that this picture, but I had sent it in the email, and he printed it out, probably in a black and white, probably in some grainy printer, not a quality picture. Maybe it was enlarged, maybe it was shrunk, I don't know what. And the Rav took a quick glance and said, Shayla Chamura Moed. He thought that maybe the vase possibly was on the borderline of a chaf. But then I came up to Shabbos and I showed him this high res picture in my phone that was sharp and clear and everything, and he was able to see clearly that no, this was fine to fix. And of course that gave me back my neshama. I was very relieved, first of all, because I didn't suffer a loss, but also because I would have, if the Rav would have possible, that it would have really brought into question for me my own judgment, because in my judgment that was really okay to fix. So for both reasons, I was relieved and grateful, and showed him some other shilas and did finish the process. Now, when I was in the throes of the anxiety, of the suspense, of the uncertainty, here's really what I did with that. I took that and I converted it into the currency of commitment. What do I mean? In general, the halacha, when it discusses the Yir Shemayim of the Sofer, it brings it basically in this scenario. Basically, it says the Fikach Tzorach Liyis Yir Shemayim Ma'oich Em Chiser Eisachas or Yitir Eisachas Nimtzo, that the tefillin are possible. In other words, where is this halacha of Yir Shemayim brought in halacha? Integrity. If a Sofer misses a letter or adds a letter, the tefillin are possible, and the point being that the Sofer can then go ahead and fix it, and no one would ever know. So this work calls for a high level of integrity. What does that mean? It means honesty, to uphold the halacha in the face of the possibility of suffering significant financial loss, and no human being in the world would ever know. This is the definition of Yir Shamayim within the context of the halachas that govern the writing of STaM. In the moment that I saw, that I created a willingness to show the Rav the Shaila, and a willingness to suffer the loss, if that would be the psak, I took that and I folded it into the way in which I know myself and to the way in which I perceive myself and into my identity, and said, this is how committed I am to integrity in my craft. That if the Rav will say that this is possible or this is, compromised, I will in fact be ready to suffer the loss. I'll suffer the loss of the cloth. I'll suffer the loss of the work. I'll deal with the customer's dissatisfaction. I'll handle it. I'll absorb it. Seeing that, I kind of harvested that and then consolidated my being through taking ownership, through claiming it, through saying, this is who I am. This is my level of commitment. This is my integrity. Now, why does that matter? That matters because once I take that committedness, once I take that very clear display, that very clear experience of commitment and integrity, and instead of being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, how am I going to handle it? No, I scooped up the whole thing, owned it, and said, this is who I am. The moment I do that, my whole being becomes consolidated. My whole being becomes more potent. And what then happens is, I then express that and share that with my customers. So when people say to me, oh my gosh, your mezuzahs are so expensive, I tell them, this is a possibility, right? I could say to them, you're not paying for the mezuzah. You're paying for my integrity. You're paying for my commitment. This is a high stakes game that I play to write mezuzahs for people. This is brain surgery. Most people have no idea about that. They're just looking at the finished product. They're just like, what do you mean? A mezuzah takes you 3 hours. No, it doesn't. It doesn't take me 3 hours. Yeah, sure, it takes me 3 hours. But there's a difference between 3 hours of mopping a floor and 3 hours of brain surgery, right? So the moment I take ownership of the way in which I am committed to integrity and I bake it into my identity, I'm able to then speak that really powerfully to others and bring them into the world. This is not a 3-hour project. This is like what's the expression of the Mishnah? Shnaim shehein arba. This is like a 3 shehein 30. Why? Because of the high level of commitment to integrity, because of the high stakes game that this is, because the possibility of losing my work and suffering a loss. This makes the 3 hours, this makes the 5 hours a whole different quality, a whole different caliber. And so the strong fee supports me in that. On a very technical level, you can even say, or think of it as overhead. There's overhead cost, because if I'm committed to practicing this craft from integrity, I'm going to lose some stuff from time to time. So I build those losses into my fees. Okay, that's a little bit of a technical way of viewing it. On a more subtle level, on a more interior level, it's just that this is not just a mezuzah. This is not just 3 hours. This is 3 hours, that's the equivalent of 30. Given my commitment to integrity. Okay, now I get that so clear in my own consciousness, in my own awareness, my own state of being, that there's no questionability about it. I can say this so powerfully to someone and so clearly without a shadow of self-doubt, because when that moment comes that I feel overwhelmed and I feel devastated, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm about to suffer a big loss. I'm like, bang, there it is. It's that it's that moment. It's that moment that reminds me and reaffirms in me, for me, the true nature of my commitment to integrity in my craft. And that is so potent. And that is worth a lot more money than what people pay. So whatever my fees are, it's like cheap relative to the level of commitment that I have. And there aren't so many fields of work that require that are so high stakes. This is unique in that way. So this is how I use my ideas and beliefs to create my relationship with something. In the first way, my relationship with the high stakes nature, with the high risk nature of writing tefillin and mezuzahs is debilitating, is crushing. It's like, oh, every day is a risk. This is too much pressure for me. This is so much stress. That's one way of holding in my mind and in my awareness and in my intention the high stakes nature of the work. I choose to take that high stakes nature of the work, to take those moments when I'm on the verge of suffering a loss and even actually suffering a loss, which has happened. So to answer the question, yes, it's happened. I have no shortage of examples. I can share pictures of those mezuzah that I wrote instead of Ishtachel Lachem, and I only caught it at the end of the mezuzah, or other parshias of tefillin or whatever. I can take all of that and look at it and say, wow, this is really an expression of who I am. Wow, you know something? I'm going to have that commitment reflected in my fees. Then I get supported by my clients. They don't just buy the thing from me like I'm selling apples or something, but they actually are supporting me in my high level of commitment to the work. And that's how I take that the high stakes nature of the work, I take ownership of it. I then fold it back into my being for it to reaffirm, strengthen, and consolidate my commitment. I then communicate that both overtly, and I share it with people, and also indirectly through charging a strong fee. And in that way, I have the client supporting my level of commitment rather than me being off in a corner, carrying the burden of my commitment all alone, suffering the losses all to my detriment. And the client is just kind of relating to me like, oh, give me the mezuzah. Yeah, where is it? Where is it? It's just 3 hours? Okay, here's $100 for that, right? No. By taking the high stakes of it, by taking my willingness to suffer a loss, baking it into my being, getting real clear on my commitment, strengthening my idea and my identity of committedness. Through that process, I can then convert it into bringing the client into that world, sharing it with them directly, and also sharing it with them indirectly by virtue of a strong fee, which then not only supports me morally, it also covers some of that cost on a technical level. That's also a way of seeing it. So that's how I have come to relate to what otherwise would be terribly anxiety-inducing, stressful nature of this work. So it's by taking ownership of it, by recontextualizing it, by folding it back into my beingness and strengthening my own idea and my own perception and my own identity of committedness, and then taking that and standing in it in my communication and relationship with the customer, and also in the fees that I'm charging. Then, not only do I have this proud, strong identity of Yir Shamayim, but I also have the people around me seeing that and supporting me. And that becomes a beautiful experience. That becomes a very wholesome experience. So that's how I go ahead and relate to that through creating it in that way. So I hope that answers the question sufficiently. And if there's any questions on this or anything else, whoever's going to watch this video, I'm just going to invite you right now. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to be in conversation. We have 2 slots left in our Creating Circle of Seifrim if you still want to join, where we're creating higher levels of well-being in and out of our Safaris work. So I love you all. And with that,